Welcome back to Morning Joe. Joining us now here in New York, Administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Mr. Scott Pruitt. Mr. Pruitt, good to see you this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
So you've seen the reaction around the world to the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. Hasn't been kind from our allies, hasn't been kind from a lot of people here in the United States. Could you just summarize for our viewers the decision that was made to pull out and why we did it?
Well, when you look at what was agreed to in Paris, it put this country, our country, at a disadvantage economically, despite the fact that we had taken several significant steps since the early 1990s with respect to reducing the CO2 footprint. I mean, people don't realize this, but today we're at pre-1994 levels with our CO2 footprint, and from 2000 to 2014 we reduced CO2 emissions by 18+%. So we've been leading with action. In my estimation, what Paris represented was a commitment to achieve things that were unachievable. The previous administration, with every step that they took in their climate action agenda, still fell 40% short of those 26 to 28% targets. So I think what the decision was about was simply sending a message that we're leading with action, not with words. We're going to make sure that we put America first with respect to these decisions and continue to export our innovation and technology to the rest of the world with respect to how to reduce the CO2 footprint.
And you've said a lot of this is about jobs, and there are people, obviously everybody in America wants to see more jobs here. But is it not, that there are more jobs created by solar energy, by the next wave of energy in this country, than by the coal jobs you've cited?
Well, I think what's important is that really the EPA and the U.S. government should not be in the business of picking which, winners and losers, all jobs matter. And when you look at the coal sector and our power grid, energy security is a big deal, as you know. And when you look at the ability to store solid hydrocarbons on site at a utility company to generate electricity, when you draw down coal, we're less than 30% or right at 30% today. That creates vulnerabilities to attacks on infrastructure.
But do you agree broadly that clean energy creates more jobs than coal?
Now, look, I mean, I think that when you look at the last 7 months, we've had a growing job market in the mining sector, including coal. We've had almost 50,000 jobs created since the fourth quarter of last year in the mining sector, including coal. So we see actually optimism in that sector. But here's the deal. I really believe that we have to focus on the stability and security of our grid and make sure that as utility companies generate electricity, they generate electricity from a variety of sources, diverse sources, to maintain that security.
Last month, the coal industry generated 400 jobs, and since the last quarter, 1,700 jobs. So where do you get your number?
I mean, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has the mining sector as a whole has identified,
so including several industries there.
Yeah, last time I checked, coal, you mine coal. So when,
but these are other mining industries too, copper, aluminum,
across
everything else.
A broad section in the mining sector. But really, there's optimism in that sector. There's investment taking place. When you look at Japan, they have 45 ultra-critical coal generation facilities. We have one. We need to focus on that as a nation, again, to focus on energy security and stability.
You said just a couple of days ago and repeated again that you haven't had a chance to talk to the President of the United States about whether or not he believes climate change is real and whether or not humans have impacted it. Have you since had a chance to ask him about that?
No, what I've talked about is our focus the last several weeks has been on the merits and demerits of the Paris deal.
Right, but have you talked to the President about
I have not talked to the President.
So in your conversations, you've never talked to him about whether or not climate change is real and if it's impacted by humans?
The focus of our discussions was and has been on the merits and demerits of the Paris decision and the Paris Accord. And the reason for that is because, look, he took input from a variety of his cabinet. It was a very informed, thoughtful approach. We took weeks of evaluating this, and he put America first with respect to this decision.
And climate change never came up in those meetings?
I want to say this to you as well.
Climate change never came up in those meetings.
He also emphasized in his speech Thursday the importance of engagement. That's what's being missed in this. The President did not exit Paris. He exited Paris because it was a bad deal. He also said that we're going to continue engagement on CO2 reduction. We're part of the UNFCCC, as you know. That discussion will continue. We've led the world with respect to CO2 reduction. We need to export innovation and technology to Russia and China. And when you look at the decision made in Paris, Russia, India, China, India didn't have to take any steps until they received $2.5 trillion of aid. China didn't have to take any steps until the year 2030. We front-loaded all of our costs, costing jobs, up to 400,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector alone.
So the conversation about Paris, which at its core is about climate change and the world's impact and human impact on it, you never raised that with President Trump in a meeting?
The focus of the discussion was on the merits and demerits of what Paris sought to achieve. You know what's interesting about the whole discussion? When you look at what was achieved,
Mr. Pruitt, it's a simple question. Mr. Pruitt, it's a simple question. Have you ever talked to the President about whether he believes climate change is real? Does he still believe that it was a hoax launched in China?
I think Joe.
Wouldn't you like to know?
I think what's important, Joe, is that the president has said that we need, when we make decisions on environmental decisions internationally, that we put America's interests first. And
right, I understand that. And I agree with that.
The president has said, look, the president said the climate is changing.
I agree with that. We're just trying to get an answer from you. I agree we should always put America first. I disagree with getting out of Paris because it's voluntary. The goals set were voluntary. But I just want, again, it's important for Americans to know. It's important for Americans to know whether their president believes that global warming was hatched as a conspiracy theory in China.
And Joe, I think with respect to the voluntary contributions that you're talking about, the 26 to 28%, when you look at domestically, third-party lawsuits, you've heard about the litigation where the EPA is sued and compels regulatory response. What the framers of the Paris Accord understood is that America would take regulatory steps to carry out that 26 to 28% reduction. And when we're withdrawing through the Energy Independent Executive Order, the Clean Power Plan as an example, that creates a gap of almost 60%. So it created exposure with respect to the obligations created in Paris legally here.
Okay. I'm sorry. I've got to stop. I want to stop it this interview has to stop in its tracks until I just get a yes/no answer from you on whether you believe it's important that Americans find out whether their president believes that climate change is a conspiracy theory based out of China.
I mean, the president has indicated, Joe, that the climate is changing. I indicated during my confirmation process that there's a warming trend with respect to the climate, and moreover, there's a human contribution to it. Measuring that with precision is very difficult. The real question is, what do we do about it? And what we've done as a country is lead through innovation and technology. And as I indicated, since the year 2000, a reduction of over 18% in that CO2 footprint. So you see that through hydraulic fracturing. You see that through horizontal drilling. You won't hear that from the environmental left. We ought to be exporting that to other nations across the globe so they can convert to natural gas and help their power generation.
The position you just laid out is much different than climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. So is your position, the one you just laid out, that the climate is changing, humans have a hand in it, but it's impossible to measure how much they've had a hand in it?
I've said that consistently.
Is that the president's view as well? Is that fair to say?
The president indicated that the climate is changing. And again, I think the reason you're asking this question is to get away from the merits and demerits of the Paris Accord, because this is really about what was decided in Paris, what steps were going to be taken as a result of that accord, and what we've done as a nation to address the CO2 footprint. I mean, Paris has almost become symbolic, and it's really mostly words and not action. It truly is, because this president is about leading with action and not words.
Okay,
the past administration tried to regulate CO2 twice and failed.
It's not just about Paris, because you guys also repealed the Clean Power Plan. You've come on this show
because it's not consistent with the Clean Air Act.
You've come on this show and you've been promoting coal as an alternative fuel. So
all fuels. Fuel diversity.
Coal, but you've been sort of touting the fact that you're increasing the number of coal jobs, even though the increase is actually much smaller than what you've been saying. So the point is that you're basically promoting fuels and promoting policies that would warm the planet, not stop the warming of the planet, even as you agree that the planet is warming and that it's man-made.
Despite the fact that we've had more energy production since the year 2000 and we've reduced the CO2 footprint through innovation and technology. So what I'm saying is that as we generate electricity in this country, it is not a wise thing to limit the number of resources. It creates vulnerabilities. We need more diversity from coal, natural gas, oil, hydro, nuclear across the board. And what we ought to be talking about is how we burn coal, how we burn electricity using natural gas and the rest, using the latest technology and innovation to reduce emissions. That's what our example has been as a country.
Joe.
We've reduced it by 18+% since the year 2000 through action, not words.
And we have. I think one of the great untold stories of what this country has done is the fact that we actually have made very good progress over the past 2 decades. We don't report about that enough. I don't think we have. But let's just say, I agree with your Barack Obama's all of the above approach, that we have to be diversified, that we have to look at every option in front of us. And I also agree that maybe Paris, the impact of Paris pulling out has been exaggerated. I personally think it's more of a diplomatic problem than anything else. What would you say, though, to the fact that of all the things that you're saying here that we agree and disagree with, that only 28% of Americans think it was a wise move to get out of the Paris Accords, according to an ABC News Washington Post poll? 28% support the decision, 59% oppose it. Could that be that this administration is on the wrong side of history when it comes to the climate?
You know, Joe, what's interesting about there's several surveys, and this is not recent. This goes back some time. When you ask people to rank the issues that are most important to them, this particular issue ranks way down the list. And then when you ask them, are you willing to pay anything to actually do something about it, it ranks even lower. And I think what people don't realize is that decisions made in Paris impact the regulatory response here, which impacts the cost of electricity to every American across the country. I mean, our price per kilowatt in this country is far better than Europe, far better than Germany.
But why do so many Americans oppose this?
I think it's what I said earlier. I think it's what I said earlier, Joe. I think that it's been a belief that Paris is kind of symbolic of whether we're going to do anything about the CO2 footprint. And they don't know the facts of what I talked about earlier, which is we are doing a lot already, that we're reducing our carbon footprint through innovation and technology, and they're just not aware of what steps we're taking. I think that's the primary reason.
If you listen to what Steve Ratner's been saying and what's been reported, it appears actually that you all are moving away from several steps that would actually help on the issue of climate change.
I'm not sure how, because we're still a part of the UNFCCC, which is the Framework Convention. We're going to continue, and the President said last week, engagement matters. International discussion on this matters. And I think, Joe, what the focus needs to be upon is really exporting what we know here, innovation and technology, to assist those countries. The short memory, I think, many times with respect to the environmental left, go back to 2015 when this deal was cut. The head of NASA scientist James Hansen said that the Paris Accord was a fake and a fraud. The general counsel for the Sierra Club criticized the commitments made in Paris.
Okay, but
and that largely was because China and India, the largest polluters in the world, didn't have to take any steps while we did.
Well, they also criticized it because it was only a voluntary agreement. They wanted it to be a mandatory agreement. China and India are different cases, obviously, because they're growing. But let's just come back to the U.S., because the fact is that when you go around saying we're creating all these coal jobs, when you go around saying that we repeal the Clean Power Plan, when you go around talking about the use of fossil fuels for centuries to come, you are in effect promoting global warming. I mean, that's what you're doing, because all of those things contribute to global warming. And yes, we have reduced our CO2 emissions, but we need to reduce them a lot more. And I don't hear you guys talking about that.
So what happens when Germany goes all renewable? When they go away from nuclear and they go away from all fossil fuels, what happens to the cost of electricity?
Germany has a terrible energy policy.
And what happens to the economy in those countries? I mean, for developed nations, for growing economies in this world, we do it better. We have nothing to be apologetic about.
So what you're saying,
we have a strong approach to reducing emissions, and have demonstrated that for 2000 to 2014, as I indicated. So we have nothing to be apologetic about, and I think at times the message is not really received by the American public that we've made tremendous progress while also growing jobs. I think
But you're talking about now going the other way. We've made tremendous progress, but you're now talking about going the other way
through technology and
using dirty fuels more.
Yeah, here's the issue. The past administration brought us a mindset that we could not be pro-growth and also pro-environment. And that's just simply wrong. We have always, as a nation, embraced growth in jobs, growth in the economy, but being a good steward of our environment. As an example, since 1980, we've obviously grown our GDP substantially in this country, but we've also seen a 65+ reduction in those pollutants that we regulate under the Clean Air Act. So we do it better than anybody in the world at growing an economy and also being a good steward of our environment. And we can do that in this space as well.
I know you've got to run, Mr. Pruitt, but I do have to ask you, why do you think Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, the former CEO, speaking of oil and gas, of ExxonMobil, supported staying in Paris?
I think Secretary Tillerson, just like many voices across the cabinet, his job is to help inform the president in making a decision. There's obviously impact internationally on this. We see the response, but our job now is to go communicate to them that America is not going to be disengaged. We're going to engage. We're going to continue the discussion. We're going to continue to lead with respect to CO2.
Don't you think the former CEO of ExxonMobil knows what's good for the American economy?
Well, ask those small business. I mean, the New York Times had a piece over the weekend talking about the small business owners in this country that were euphoric at the decision that the president made. That represents about 99% of our jobs in this country. This president has made a commitment to having a pro-jobs, pro-growth, and pro-environment agenda. Paris was a bad deal for this country. He said that he was going to maintain engagement, and we're going to do that on the CO2 side and focus on innovation and technology, as opposed to targets that can't be met in Paris.
We could talk to you all morning about this. I know they're pulling you out of here to go. Mr. Pruitt, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Safe travels to Italy tomorrow.
On tomorrow's show, Senate Intel Committee Vice Chair Mark Warner joins us, and on Friday we'll be live on Capitol Hill the morning after James Comey testifies before Congress. Among our guests will be House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senators Joe Manchin and Susan Collins. We got much more ahead this morning. Stay with us.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.